This is Travel in 10.
Ceci est la voyage dans 10.
This is podcast Reise in 10.
You're listening to Travel in 10. And now, your host, David Brody.
On today's show, we're going to travel to Africa. We're going to be joined by African travel specialist and guidebook author Julian Harrison. So come along with us as we learn about safari travel in Africa. I'm joined today by Julian Harrison, the author of Fodor's Africa Safari, From Budget to Big Spending. Julian's been organizing safari trips for years for clients from Paul Newman to Jack Hanna, and is a founding member of the United Nations Environmental Programme's Sustainable Tourism Initiative. Thanks very much for taking the time to join me today, Julian.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Julian, I understand that you grew up in South Africa. I wonder, how did you first get involved in arranging safari trips?
I initially started my career in tourism with the South African Tourism Board, which is the government tourist office of South Africa. And while I was there, I was also involved with guiding as well as being an honorary officer for the National Parks Board.
Terrific. Well, I think a lot of people, when they think of the idea of traveling to Africa, it's exciting. It's somewhere that everyone wants to go, but at the same time, it's pretty intimidating, even for seasoned travelers. It's a destination that maybe that people perceive to be harder to travel around than most. And I'm wondering, where do you suggest that people start when they're first organizing a trip?
Well, I think they need to talk to a professional. Obviously, you can gain a lot of information and learn a lot from the internet. But at the end of the day, you really need to talk to somebody who knows where to send you, when to send you, and also somebody that can pick up the pieces if any problems arise along the way. But in terms of South Africa, I think it's probably, for a first-timer on safari, it's the perfect destination because it's very much I like to describe it as a first-world country within a third-world environment because everything works. The water is safe to drink, the roads are good, the infrastructure is there. And as a result, you can be in a modern city 1 minute, and within an hour you can be sitting in an open Land Rover watching lions. So it's the perfect place for somebody to go for their first safari, I think.
For their first trip out. For that first trip out, I mean, what are some of the not-to-be-missed destinations that they should be considering, and how much time do you think someone really needs to set aside to get a good taste of all there is to see in South Africa?
Most people generally go for, I'd say, minimum 10 days, maximum, well, on average 2 weeks, and then, obviously people that maybe are retired or have the time on their hands, sometimes will do 3 or 4 or even 5 weeks. But for the most part, most people do 2 weeks. And I think a good itinerary in that region would be probably to start off in Cape Town, South Africa, perhaps just to get over a little jet lag. Also, it's just an extremely beautiful city with lots to see and do. I mean, you've got natural colonies of penguins along the beaches. You get some of the best whale watching in the world in that region. You have a fantastic wine-producing region just outside of Cape Town. And it's just the perfect place to start. From there, I would probably head on up into the Kruger National Park because that's really where you're going to get the best safaris. It's a very large area. It's about the size of the country Israel, and as a result, you have a huge diversity and certainly lots and lots of animals in the region. Or lodges in the region that you find there, they vary from somewhat rustic right through to ultra luxurious, where every suite, for example, has its own private swimming pool, and there's world-class chefs, world-class wines. Spas, just very, very luxurious. So there's a whole range of accommodations that people can choose from.
In terms of some of those really top luxury destinations, are there a couple of really not-to-be-missed hotels or restaurants or unique travel experiences that people may have not heard about yet, places that you would really recommend seeking out?
Well, I think in terms of safari lodges, people are probably the most well-known in terms of the top end. Is a property called Singia Game Lodge. It has been number 1 in Condé Nast Traveler magazine's list for several years in a row as being the top property in Africa, and I believe even in the world. 1 year it got top property in the world. Londolozi, Mala Mala is one that's been around for a long, long time. Sabi. There's several good properties, but I'd say Singia probably is the number one property in the Kruger Park area.
And what's so unique about that property? Is there something that they do different there?
Well, I think it's kind of, as I described, it's just very, very luxurious in the sense that the suites are huge. There's a big emphasis on service and wines and cuisine. Every suite has its own private plunge pool. The spa is world class. It's just a very, very good property, very well run, very professionally run property.
And they would run sort of safari trips right out of the lodge. I'm assuming is it into Kruger National Park, or? It's
located within what is known as the Greater Kruger National Park, but it's a private area. It's a privately owned land, and as a result, you don't have other tourists coming onto the land. It's only the people that are actually staying at that particular lodge are the ones that are able to utilize that area. So it's very non-commercial. Very few vehicles out there. When you're out there seeing animals, if you see another vehicle, generally that's about it. There's nobody else out there. But a typical day would be leaving in the morning. You wake up at sunrise, have a light breakfast, coffee, tea, muffins, that kind of stuff, and then head out on an open safari vehicle with your guide and tracker. And you go off and look for the animals, and at around 9:30, 9:45, you head back to the lodge for breakfast. And then it's basically downtime for the rest of the day during the heat of the day, because the animals are resting up in the shade. You wouldn't find them if you were out there in the heat anyway. So it's generally after breakfast resting time, reading, having a spa treatment, lying by the pool, and then at around 3:30, 4 o'clock you gather for high tea, and then go out on your afternoon game drive, which continues until sunset. And at that point, the ranger finds a nice spot out in the bush to watch the sun go down, and has the traditional, what they call sundowner drinks. And as it gets darker, you head back onto the vehicle and continue with a powerful spotlight to start looking for the nocturnal animals like leopard and hyena and civet and so on. And then back to the lodge at somewhere around 7:30, 7:45, get showered up, freshened up, and then head on down to dinner. And that's pretty much a typical day on safari.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good typical day to me.
It's a lot of fun.
How much would a night somewhere like that run you?
At somewhere like Singia Game Lodge, you're looking at around $1,300 per person per night.
So it's not inexpensive, but a pretty amazing travel experience, and I imagine a pretty once in a lifetime trip.
And like I say, there's certainly a whole range below that of properties where you don't necessarily have to spend that much money, but still get very good quality lodging, good quality experience, and still see lots of animals.
So what would be sort of the other end of the spectrum? If someone wanted to go somewhere, where they had some of the modern conveniences, but not that degree of luxury, what could they expect to spend in an evening?
There's lodges as low as around $300 per person per night. And all of the lodges, by the way, are all fully inclusive of all the meals, all the activities, and in some cases, like in Singia's case, all your drinks and so on as well. But a $300 lodge, it's by no means rustic. It's still a very good, high-quality property, but doesn't have all the frills and trimmings like the private plunge pools and the spas and all that type of thing.
Sure. Now, if someone were to travel a bit further afield to some of the other destinations, into Tanzania or into Namibia or other spots, are there better travel bargains to be had there versus South Africa? Or?
I would say Kenya probably has the best deals as far as a standard safari is concerned. Some of the other destinations like Botswana, Tanzania to a certain extent, as well as Namibia, tend to be on the higher side purely because, like in Botswana particularly, almost all safaris you have to move between the various areas by light aircraft, and the more light aircraft that are involved, the higher price the safari becomes.
Sure.
But Botswana has become an incredibly popular destination. It's an area where we can't get people in there. I mean, it's a struggle to get people in there next year. Anywhere from June through the end of October is already quite heavily booked.
I'm wondering, through your work with the UN Sustainable Tourism Initiative, as well as just your company's work and your own travel around Africa, if you've come across some really good options, if people want to give back during their travel, I mean, in terms of volunteer vacation options or other things they can do while they're there traveling in Africa, any suggestions that people should be considering?
Well, I think there's a number of projects. In fact, there's numerous projects that people can contribute to. Lots of organizations like the African Wildlife Foundation, for example. Our company in particular, we work with a ground operator in South Africa that through every client we send on safari, a donation is made to their wildlife trust, which automatically that money goes into conservation and local community upliftment projects. So anybody traveling with us is already contributing towards a worthy cause while they're in South Africa or any one of the countries in which we operate.
Is that a trend you're seeing, that people are starting to expect that more on the trips that they're doing into Africa?
I think people are definitely more aware of being eco-friendly. And I think it's important, as a company owner, we have to. I mean, we have no option but to protect the natural resources in Africa, not only the animals and the fauna and flora, but also the peoples of Africa, because at the end of the day, that's what our product is all about. If our product diminishes or disappears, we no longer have businesses. So it's extremely important that to be eco-friendly, to utilize products that do practice sustainable development, because at the end of the day, that's we have to have all of that fauna and flora in place for our kids.
Absolutely. Well, I'm wondering a bit about also in terms of safety precautions, that things that people should be thinking about. I mean, even in terms of some of the places that I think are traditionally thought of as a bit safer to travel to in Africa. You mentioned Kenya, for example, is one of them. I know the Canadian government has a travel advisory there right now. I'm wondering, what people should be concerned about, maybe what they shouldn't be as concerned about when they're gearing up for a trip.
I think it all boils down to who you're traveling with, I think, in terms of, it's a case of if I come to the United States and I arrive in a city that I have no idea where I'm going, I could easily stumble into areas that I, probably shouldn't be in. And I think likewise, if you go into Africa, if you're going with a reputable company that knows where to take you, where not to take you, what to look out for, there really is no reason for you to get into any trouble. I think it's quite safe on safari. I think, if anything, you've probably got more of a chance of getting injured by a wild animal than you do of through a human being. And again, if you're listening to your guides and doing what they're telling you to do and not to do, there's also no reason why you should get injured that way. So, I think it's perhaps Africa, I think, to a large extent, is lumped into one big continent as opposed to many different countries within the continent. And so people perceive it as being dangerous, as lawless, and so on. And believe me, there are areas of Africa that are exactly that. But the areas that we operate in are quite peaceful, quite safe, really not a problem to travel to. I certainly don't see it as a major risk in any way. I've been taking my kids to all of these countries, including Kenya and Tanzania and Botswana and everywhere, since they were 3, 5, and 7. And, we've continued to take them to Africa every year or every 18 months or so, because I think they're just gaining so much from it. And, obviously as a father, I certainly wouldn't be taking them if I felt it was unsafe in any way.
Absolutely. Well, Julian, thanks very much for taking the time to do this today. If people are interested in booking a trip and want to contact you for more information, how can they get in touch?
Well, we have a website, which is www.premiertours.com. And our 800 number is 800-545-1910.
Okay, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed today's edition of Travel in 10 with Julian Harrison from Premier Tours. We're going to have upcoming shows over the next couple of weeks. Another video tour of Tokyo, Japan coming up, probably sometime mid-next month, as well as shows on Vancouver, British Columbia, Cuba, more shows on Laos, Thailand, other destinations around Southeast Asia. If you've got any suggestions or anything you'd like to hear on the show, please feel free to email me at travelin10@gmail.com. It's Dave Brody. I hope you've enjoyed the show.
Thanks for listening to the Travel in 10 podcast. Please email any questions, comments, or suggestions you have to travelin10@gmail.com. This has been a presentation of Travel in 10.